I want to welcome Tara Viswanathan to the stage.
All right.
Hello. Hi. I am super excited. So, actually, let's not talk about what Rupa does to start. Let's start with your journey. I really love your story. Tell us a little bit about, before you got into startups, what were you doing?
What was I doing before I got into startups? I don't even know what getting into startups.
Okay,
okay, hold on. It was like in 7th grade, I sold duct tape purses. Does that count? All things. Before Rupa, I was just trying to figure it out. I think that I've always, it's a funny thing, I think, starting a company where I don't know if there's a day that you decide that you're going to start a company. You just kind of do it, and you just kind of feel like this is obviously something I'm going to do, and it just happens. But there was a moment where, I went to grad school, I graduated, and I kind of got sucked into doing the thing that everybody wants you to do. So everybody, the cool thing to do is to run product at a sexy startup. And so, I got a job offer to go run product at this tech startup, and had good equity, had good salary, and it was right on paper. And I think for all of the big decisions in life, we tend to do the thing that looks right on paper first before we're actually feel confident listening to our gut and just doing the thing that might look crazy to everybody else but feels right to us. So I took that job, and 1 month in, I hated it. And about 6 months in, I left. And it was actually at that time where a close friend from high school got in a car accident and passed away. And I don't know if I actually shared that story, but that was like a real turning point for me, where I realized life is very, very short, and why are we, if we're not doing what we want to be doing today, what are we doing?
And that's something I've always admired about you. Like, you've always been very mission-driven, which I think is something that many people take a long time to figure out, but you've always known from a pretty early age. So after your friend's accident, what did you do next?
Yeah, so I think it was a pivot point for me, not in what I wanted to do, but when and how, I think. Because when you are in the early stages, it's kind of really easy to go under the radar and kind of work on your idea and spend a lot of time figuring out what the right thing to do is, because you don't have any external pressure pulling you. You have to push yourself. And I think the thing that happened in that moment was, what am I doing? Like, go way faster. So I set a deadline for myself. I basically, and actually, I didn't start Rupa right after that. What I did at that point was I said, what are my mental blockers that are getting in the way of me actually being successful in running a company? And I knew that everybody has insecurities, but many of us have debilitating insecurities that actually will slow us down if we don't work on them. And so I gave myself a timeline. I said, in 1 year, I'm going to prove to myself that I can make the same salary as I was making without having that job. I'm going to prove to myself. And so I made a list of 3 of these things. And I basically, that was my mission for 1 year. And so I ended up doing that. I started, quote unquote, a consulting company. It was basically just me pitching startups to let me do product for them. But I think there's a lot of value in proving to yourself that you don't need a job, or you don't need to have that fallback. And to me, it was really, really pivotal in actually going all in and never questioning when I did go all in.
Mm-hmm. And from that point, what was some of the impetus behind the original vision of Rupa Health? I need to learn how to use a mic.
The power. The original vision. So honestly, the original vision started probably when I was in college. And there was a moment where, I went to a very work hard, play hard kind of school. I studied finance everybody went straight to Wall Street, and everybody was a banker consulting, and I was just like, what is this? So I went from small town Texas, and I had no idea. I thought business school meant learning how to start a business, and turns out it's investment banking and consulting. So no one told me. So I show up, and it's a very work hard, play hard culture, and I actually loved that because I got to be around smart people for the first time, and really smart people. And it was binge drinking, binge studying, binge exercise. It was very intense. And I remember one morning I woke up in my junior year and I realized I felt really strange in my body, and what is going on? And then I realized I slept 8 hours, I'm hydrated, I feel good, and this is really unfamiliar for me. And it was the first time in years that I'd actually felt good. And I realized in that moment, I was like, this is the single most important thing that that we have as humanity is our livelihoods and what it means to feel alive. And in that moment, I actually wrote down, I said, I'm going to build a company that changes the standard of living, like what it means to truly be alive for every person on the planet. And I had no idea how I was going to do that. And I was probably, oh my gosh, that was 7 or 8 years before I started Rupa. So it was just that moment.
Wow. Okay. So talk a little bit about the early version of Rupa.
Yeah.
What is that? What's that look like?
And then maybe one other thing to add to the early days is it's like when I realized my favorite color was blue, although you couldn't tell right now, but pretty much everything I own is blue, right? And I didn't actually realize that blue was my favorite color until I looked around. I was like, oh, everything I own is blue. I think similarly, the thing that you want to work on is a thing that you're just obsessed with, that you might not even realize you're so obsessed with, because it's what you spend all your free time on, it's what you're thinking about, it's that thing. And when you have that thing, and for me it was health and wellness, and at that time, 2011, 2012, health and wellness really wasn't a big thing. We've seen a huge shift in the last 5 years, but it really wasn't. I was spending all my time there. So it really wasn't a question of what do I want to work on, it was where am I spending my time, and that led me to what I want to work on. So the early days, maybe a continuation of that, was just, I saw a future in which health and how people take care of themselves looked very different, and technology played a role. And it was, 2012, 2013, I had no idea what that looked like. But I just kept trying to associate myself with anything that could even be in that realm. And so the very early days, all Rupa was a, find an acupuncturist in the Bay Area. That was the V1. And I actually knew that's what we raised our pre-seed off of. And I knew that wasn't going to be the product we ended up with. But I knew that I had to start somewhere. And once you start somewhere and you just keep going, you'll get to that thing.
Mm-hmm. And, I think what Rupa looks like today is pretty different from that V1, right?
Yeah.
So talk us a little bit through your thought process of all of that evolution and that iteration happened.
It's like carving the statue from the marble, right? Like, first you kind of chop out and you say, okay, I think there's a problem in this industry, I see this future. Here's a thing that I see that other people might not, and here's where I'm willing to bet truly the next 10 years of my life. And I think it's an important statement to make, because I think this stuff doesn't happen in 1 year and 3 years. Like, it happens over a span of a decade. Like, all of it, from when you start thinking about it to when you feel like you have something that's going to live on in the world. And so when you start chopping away, it was, what is the industry, where's the change that I believe is going to happen? And then who do I want to build for, and how do I think that market is going to change? And then what do I want to build to solve that problem? Like, where's the biggest problem I want to build? And so the market was always, hey, there's this whole underground world. At that time, it was very underground, of functional, integrative, like wellness medicine that's actually being practiced. And here's a secret: it's being practiced by Stanford and Harvard doctors who dropped out of the conventional system and actually were treating people in a completely different way, from the root cause, looking at data, and trying to get at the underlying reason why people were sick and solving that. That was already happening. And so my belief was that this is the ecosystem that's going to blow up. What is the biggest problem there, and how do I solve it? So the first problem was patients don't even know how to find a practitioner, so let me go do that. And so Rupa today is the core thing that we do is we bring a bunch of specialty lab tests together and let practitioners order for their patients off of that. And then we do a lot of other stuff with the results and interpretations and things like that, but it's this core workflow around lab testing, and specifically like advanced specialty lab testing. And so I think the jump there is that we've always been in contact with our core audience and the core market, which is the practitioner. And we basically said, what is the problem that you have and how do we build for that problem? And does that problem have a big enough dollar value so that we can build a multi-billion dollar company off of it?
And I think it's interesting how you talk about this iterative process because there are all these constraints. There's the constraint of, all right, who are we serving? Who's going to pay? How much? And like, there are just all these constraints, right? As you are experimenting and iterating, like, do you have a framework for how you experiment and iterate when you have no idea where the optimal solution is? Did you have, as you were experimenting, did you have a way of thinking about, okay, we're going to try this, and then if this happens, we're going to do that? Like, how do you think about that process?
Yeah. Maybe I did, but it's only in hindsight that I can articulate it. Okay. And I think that's part of this, which is decision making is just like one of the core skills that you have to develop. Like, how do you make good gut-based decisions? Because you don't have time to make, truly, you don't have time to wait for the data, because oftentimes you have to go based off of your gut, which is based off of leading indicators often, and that's kind of a founder's superpower, is you will make decisions whereas other people are waiting for data or proof. And so I think one of the biggest things to develop is just spending as much time as you can with your customers. Like I would get all these doctors on my text message, and I'd invite, we had a Thanksgiving party where I basically invited them all to my apartment and just talked to them, right? And you just get a sense so that when you start building product, you just know if something's going to work, and as you're doing interviews, you just know.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I feel like all of the best founders in our portfolio say that exact same thing, which is they spend so much time with their customers. They know their customers day and life in and out. They are besties with their customers. And so it's much easier to kind of build for that when you have that strong understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're not your customer. You have to spend, hundreds and hundreds of hours understanding them, understanding what they do, why they do it. One of the things we did was we knew there was a problem because there was this supply-demand mismatch, right? There's so many people who wanted to get access to this care, and yet it was so expensive. Talk $400, $500 for a visit out of pocket, not including cost of tests and all that. And then there were so few practitioners who people wanted to see. So we're like, what's going on here? Like, how do we make this more efficient? And there's a lot of new practitioners too who wanted to enter the field, and so people weren't connecting, and so we knew there was a problem. And so what we did was we said, well, let's just go spend as much time as we can. That didn't mean let me go interview people. What it actually ended up meaning was let's go build a clinic, and it'll be an MVP of a clinic. But we said we'll have 1 month, my co-founder and I, where we're going to challenge ourselves to build a digital health clinic. This is pre-COVID, and we're going to cold email doctors to join our clinic. We posted on Instagram, and I sent newsletters out to find patients. And we basically sat in on those appointments.
Oh, wow.
And that's how we got to the labs piece.
I think one of the natural follow-up questions is, how do you get the trust of people who don't know and essentially become besties with them over time?
You just are interested in them as a human. I think that in general, if you're building for a customer who has a problem, if they have a problem, they're going to feel overlooked. And they've probably brought this problem up over they've some kind of no one understands me feeling because they're going through a problem. And how do you get to that? How do you say, I'm the person who really just wants to help your life, and I really believe in what you're doing, and I want to help you. And you have to genuinely mean it. People can smell the fake. So one clear example of this is when we first had our product, I sent out in my personal email, probably we got somebody to scrape the emails from some list, and I cold emailed like 1,000 doctors or something, and from my personal email. And in it, I said, here's what our product does. But by the way, I actually had spent time building clinics, which I knew they all were trying to do, and that was a problem for them. And even if you don't care anything about our product, hop on a call with me and I can explain to you what works and what doesn't work. And a lot of people, more people responded to the advice for how to help them with their clinic, and then they turned into our most loyal customers.
Oh, wow. So helping them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So how do you go from, sort of search engine for acupuncture to, all right, now actually, where does the monetization come in at which point?
Well, I think yes, I am very mission driven, but I also am a capitalist, and I really believe in, we have to build a business that can sustain itself. Otherwise, there's no one's going to just keep giving us money if this thing isn't actually economically viable. And so there's a lot of different ways to think about that. But one of the first things we did was we knew immediately that we hit on something, because people, the moment we knew was, one of the moments we knew was a doctor told a friend, because we'd asked her, we said, hey, would you want us to handle your labs for you? And she said, oh my gosh, that is an amazing business idea. Without us saying anything, she told her friend contacted us and said, I'm starting my new clinic in January, and I cannot start unless I have your product, because she thought it was live. And so we basically sprinted to be able to launch the product for her. So that was a moment. But even before that, we sat down and we said, we built a financial model, very back of the envelope. And we said, okay, we believe we can, charge this service fee for these services. And then we actually tested that. So we had, before we even had a product, we used Gmail, Google Docs, and PayPal. And so if you imagine, a doctor had a random company send their patient a PayPal invoice with a 7% service fee charge, and they paid it, and they kept coming back. And so that's how we knew, and we basically, we make money in lots of different ways now, but that's one of them.
Yeah, I love that. And so, so you start to find, sort of call it semblance of product market fit. The other thing I've always been really impressed by is the operational efficiency that you have at Rupa, that you've built up. So how do you go from that with, whatever, a handful of people to, now we have 100 people and all this money and all this revenue, et cetera. How do you start to scale to the next level beyond yourself?
So our head of finance is here right now, and I just want him to realize that someone said we have operational efficiency. Just for the record, we have operational efficiency. We absolutely do not have operational efficiency. But I get your point. How do we go from, in just a few years, serving, 5 patients a month to now tens, hundreds of thousands? It's a lot. And the answer is you just kind of do it. And it's what I mean by that is you don't, well, maybe there's some companies that do this, but it wasn't like we went from 1 to 100,000 in a day. The way we've thought about this is we will do the manual thing no matter what, if we have to do the manual thing. We don't try to create efficiency, we try to create great experiences for our customers. And even if that is, 10 people behind the scenes, answering customer support, all of that, we will do that. And so we've always placed a premium on doing those types of things. But the answer to this question, how do you effectively scale a great company? It's people. And we just got really lucky by finding truly amazing raw talent generalists who just came in and have owned things and now are on our senior leadership.
So I'm going to break this big hairy topic down into a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
So, all right, how do you hire a great person? What is your...
Oh, I've made so many mistakes, and I've learned so much. And I think every founder will tell you this. I think it's funny because, you hear the hit rate for hiring great people. If you hire 50% of your people and you keep them and they're great, that is an amazing hit rate, right? And I used to hear that early on. I was like, no. I can do way better than that. 50% is not. and it's just not true. You just don't know. Some of my best hires have been people who nobody wanted me to hire. And some of my, worst hires are ones that I felt super confident about. I think the most important things that I've learned could be summed up in a few, maybe like bullets. The first one is, if you don't know how to do the job or what great looks like, you should not hire for that person. Like you're not qualified to hire for that person. And so whenever we had to hire a more senior head of engineering, I spent a full month learning what a great head of engineering looks like. And all of our investors were, what are you doing? Like, go hire the person. And I said, I can't until we get that person. And then it ended up working. Like this person had 17 different offers from OpenAI and Stripe everywhere, and he ended up coming, and it just paid off so much. The second thing is when your gut says yes, you might be wrong, but when your gut says no, you're not wrong.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And you should listen to that. And then the last thing I'd say is one of the most important things is critical thinking, and you can learn a lot about how somebody thinks based on how they speak. If you are struggling to understand what they're saying in a sentence, it is usually a sign of weak critical thinking or bad habits, but both of those things are very hard to train.
Yeah, interesting. So, okay, the first one is fascinating because, founders may have had a job before, like in a particular, realm, and then they have to go and hire for every job. So how is it that you kind of learn whatever head of engineering does, head of sales, head of all this stuff that you may not have done before? Like any shortcuts?
There are no shortcuts. And the true shortcut is go do that job for a little bit. And then you will know exactly what you're looking for. But I think that the truth is, it is an incredibly hard thing to do. Because you have to not only hire the right person, you need to then manage them and get excellence out of them. And if you don't know what that looks like, it's very, very, very hard. And so I don't think there's any shortcuts. And I think that this is where second-time founders and third-time founders actually have a massive advantage. Like, the amount of questions is like, what is talent? I didn't even know what that was, a year ago. What is HRBP? All these things. And you just have to learn that if you're a first-time founder, the number one skill is speed of learning.
Yes, 100%. That's why we're called hustle and learn. Okay, so you have this framework for hiring people. Let's talk about the flip side for a government. Like, they always say, fire fast. But, in reality, it's like, well, this person's they're good, and we need them because there's no one else here to do that job. Like, you kind of strike that balance.
There is no balance. Fire fast. Truly, we have made this mistake and paid for it over and over and over again. And I think this is just human nature, and those who can fight it and really bite the bullet and fire fast, that is kudos to them. So here's the thing about all of this advice, right? Hire exceptional people, hire slow, fire fast, hire fast, fire fast. It's always fire fast, whether you hire slow or fast. But the thing is, if you don't, all of these stuff, like Meta and Elon, all these things, they can hire and fire really quickly because they have this recruiting engine. They have this pipeline, and they have this demand. And so someone's out, someone's in the door. And I think that's, all this advice is nice in theory, but when you're actually building a company and you only have one person paying the bills or whatever it is, and that's going to now be on your plate, what do you do? It's incredibly difficult, but I don't want to talk about the war stories here, but maybe later in time I can talk about them one-on-one. It is never worth it. Never worth it. Let that thing burn.
Even if you don't have somebody to hop in. Wow. Okay. All right. And so, now that you've been on this journey, right? You went from, we're doing customer development, whatever you want to call it. We're scaling. You've raised tens of millions of dollars, And can you share where the revenues, or are we not talking
Yeah, my head of finance said no.
No, okay, we're not sharing that. But I will just say that I would say relative to most companies in startup land, whatever you want to call it, Rupa has raised very little relative to their traction, which I think says a lot about your operational efficiency, even if others disagree.
We haven't raised in 2+3 years. Yeah.
So now that you've kind of been on that, like you've seen that whole thing, what would you do differently? Like, if you knew all this stuff and you were to go back, rewind the clock, anything?
Everything. Everything. Like, if you look at life and you wouldn't do things differently, I mean, I think there's one way to look at it, which is I wouldn't do anything differently because everything is a learning experience. But then there's, hey, if I could cherry pick and if I could do things differently, I absolutely would. So many mistakes, so many tiny mistakes that can compound. I think here's the difficult thing. It's when you're in a startup, you have a million decisions, and it's very difficult. It's very easy to say, focus on the big things and let the little things slide. But the thing that people don't talk about is it's hard to distinguish what is a big thing and what is a small thing in the moment, because it's often the small things that you, in the moment, it was a good decision to ignore it, but it's often the small things that end up coming back to bite you and really ruining something. And I think part of it is just you have to accept that. And so when I used to say accept that there will be chaos once every, day. Like once every quarter at a certain level, like there will be something that you missed that ends up snowballing into a big issue. And I talked about this a little bit, but I talked about this other places a little bit, but here's the thing is if you're running a company, if you're CEO, your entire day is fires. You don't have the ability to do things other than just kind of here are the problems I need to take care of. And at any given time, you have an infinite list of these problems, but you can only focus on number 1, 2, and 3. And so number 4 might be a big issue, and to the person who needs help with number 4, they're looking at you and they're saying, why aren't you dealing with this? This is such a huge problem. But you are probably dealing with 1, 2, and 3, and most people might not even know what 1, 2, and 3 are, because oftentimes you're working on things that are just not visible to the rest of the company. And so I think most of the mistakes have come from when my gut knew that something was a top priority in getting back to the fire conversation, but I didn't act on it because I logically convinced myself that it was a small thing.
It's hard. Everything always seems like it's on fire.
Yeah. And to answer your question like directly, it is people things, and I think it is like we've had 20 quarters of straight growth. We've never had a down quarter in Rupa's history. And it's very hard to build a warlike culture when the numbers keep going up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think there is something to striking the right balance of, hey, we're going to celebrate our success, but we're always going to feel like we have that pressure on us.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to move into some Q&A. You're cool with that. But first, a couple of shout-outs. First off, thank you, Xander Media. They're taking the photos. So if you have a question, they will be taking your photo most likely. And so, yeah, smile for the camera. And then also, to kick off Q&A, I would love to bring up Sergio Zafra from AWS. Is Sergio here? To ask Tara the first question. Think about your questions while Sergio is asking his. And Tara is an AWS customer.
That's right. All right, hello everyone. My name is Sergio. I am from the AWS Startups team, and literally my goal, which are here. My goal is to support portfolio startups from multiple points, and also fund the community, get access to the programs that we have, getting access to credits, support, and also access to the accelerators that we're running throughout the year. So basically, literally, if you want credits, like you can find the instructions on the Rupa page or the email that you just got from Fun in the last couple of days with the instructions to get 5K. If you need more, just let me know. If you need help from AWS, let me know. And yeah, Rupa is actually one of those cases where I successfully started receiving credits from the very beginning and access to the support that we are offering to AWS. So my question for you, Tara, is probably the healthcare industry is one of the most appealing to create a company because it is one of the with the most I would say inefficiencies, and maybe the access is still not balanced for everyone, but at the same time it's one of the most regulated and also one of the hardest to influence as well. So my question for you is what advice do you have for a founder who is thinking about starting a healthcare company? What's the first thing that you would recommend? What's the first advice? Thank you.
Thank you. Happy AWS customer. Would love any more free credits if you want to give it to us. Never shame. Never shame. I don't know if you want my answer, which is, unfortunately, if I wasn't building this company, I wouldn't build a company in healthcare. But, and I think that's a little bit of my personality, which is I'm just so passionate about the space that we're in, and we play kind of outside the traditional healthcare system. And so we're not, selling to payers, providers. We touch healthcare practitioners and patients directly, and so we work with that. But I think for people who want to build in healthcare, I think just recognize what that means for you. What does that mean for timing? What does that mean for the amount of money you need to raise? What does that mean for, but by timing I mean timing of sales and things like that if you need to go into a regulated space. What does that mean for costs that you have to bear that you might not if you aren't in a space like this? And so just think about it because it does change the dynamics of a business. And I can't tell you how, it's just funny to think about, looking at our revenue versus, in 2020 and 2021, crypto companies with way less revenue than us, and just seeing the valuation differences and seeing all of that stuff. It is just a fundamentally different industry. I will say it is one of the most rewarding things that you can end up with. It's one of the most rewarding industries that you can end up working in. And I definitely took that for granted because people really want to work for a mission-driven company, and I can't tell you the amount of people who come to us and say, this is my life's work, and I want to do this, and it's amazing. So pros and cons, but there's a lot of people who are doing it right now, and you can learn a lot from what's already out there.
Awesome. All right, next question.
Thank you. You talked about creating a wall-like culture in your company. Can you shine some light on when you did the first hire, what was the wall-like culture building mean for you, and what does it mean now with 100 employees?
Oh man, I will say that the early days were very much, trench. We'd all be in the trenches together. War-like culture. We're the small guys. We're gonna do it. And then you bring in people who don't understand what it was like to, have a 5-hour conversation, argument over whether we should pay, $9 a month to Zoom, right? For so literally, it's our first fight as co-founders. I was like, no, we're cancel 40 minutes, start a new meeting. We do not need a buy Zoom. And we raised $5 million. And literally, we used to have our product strategy meetings on Sunday. Everybody would show up on Sunday, and we do our product strategy, and that was the culture, and everybody loved it. And then you bring in people who, it's not their fault. They just didn't see what it took to get there, and they didn't see what it was like to be really hungry. And it's incredibly hard because you can't force them to know what that's like. I think that's a lesson that I've learned, a big lesson I've learned, which is you should never expect anyone to understand what you're going through because they haven't been through it. And instead, you should just try to get them to have the experience that you want them to have. And so And so we actually went through, 3 years of not having a warlike culture. And as much as you want to have a warlike culture, there was a contingency of people who had this warlike mentality, and then there's a contingency of people who just saw the numbers go up. And it was very frustrating for different people. But then I think, truly, the hard thing about hard things is probably the best book on this, which is you cannot say the same things or act the same way or have the same process or even have process when you're in wartime versus when you're in peacetime. You actually have to use a different tone of voice. You have to let people know what is unacceptable. And it can be shocking for people because I think people think of me as the really fun, I don't even know, like maybe makes bad jokes, has high standards, but I'm going to be cheerful in all hands. So when I show up and I'm like, guys, we need to completely change this, people like lose their shit, right? But it's kind of an important thing to do. And so I'd say just don't be afraid of people kind of being very surprised in the beginning, because that shift needs to happen. And if you don't have that, then you're not actually getting to that place of people realizing that we're wartime, we're top down, we're doing this for the greater good, but this is what we're doing today.
Thank you.
Hi, going back to the point of hiring and firing, I wanted to think about the cases where your guys as a meeting and specifically say there are early employees who really believe in your cause, but you're not really sure that their skills will scale with the scale of the company. How do you make those decisions? Because you're betting on somebody else's future potential along with a lot of other things. And in that case, is it better to make that decision sooner or later?
So you're asking about early employees and how long they scale?
Early employees who are passionate about the cause, they're all in the war room with you now, they're just not sure if their skills are going to scale.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of, it's a little bit of an art where you have, and this is a little bit of personal choice. It's like, do you cut them out right, when they're still doing a good job and try to layer them, or do you believe that they're going to be good? And I heard something recently that was really helpful for this, which is basically, there are some roles where the historical knowledge of the company should be valued way higher than other roles. And there are other roles where experience out in the world should be valued way higher than other roles. And so I think it's actually like not just a person by person thing, but it's a role by role thing. For example, we have to sell to lab companies, and their C-suite is usually not wanting to talk to anybody except for me unless we have somebody who can hold their own with that person. While it might be really valuable for somebody who's grown up within the company to take that role, just the external experience is going to be overvalued in that specific role. Then take an engineer who knows everything about how the product's built and how the engineering culture is. It might actually be worth it to train them into the tech lead or the engineering manager. And so it really depends on, I'd say, like, think about specific skills for the role, and then match it to how the person is doing. But the one thing I'll say is, if somebody messes up once, that's fine. If they mess up twice, you gotta fix the problem.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. So you spoke a lot about decision making. I'm curious, how do you handle the decision fatigue? Making all of these decisions, starting from the ground level when you started off early on, and then reaching, at the 10,000 foot level and everything else in between. How have you seen decision fatigue kind of play into your role space and evolve over the course of the growth of your business as a leader?
Yeah, it's real. And I joke, I'm like, I don't choose my food anymore. Like, I just let somebody else pick my food. Like, you have to like stop something, right? That's my equivalent of like the black turtleneck or the black t-shirt. There's a book by Annie Duke who wrote Thinking in Bets, but it's called, I actually like some of her other books even better. It's called How to Decide. So I dedicated an entire year to decision making early on because I realized that, there are certain things that if you learn a skill really well, it's going to compound and make everything else better. And truthfully, that's how I think about sleep. That's how I think about some of these like keystone things that if you just work on these, you'll get 80% of the value. It's the 80-20 rule. And for decision making, there are a lot of strategies that you can actually learn. It's a skill that you can learn, and there's a book called How to Decide. But some of them are, you need to know the amount of information should be 60% to 75% confident. If you're above that, then you spend too much time on the decision. There's all kinds of stuff like that, and I think that it's really just trial and error. But the biggest one is just don't let decisions fester, especially when they're reversible, which are 99% of decisions.
Question. Limiting beliefs. What kind of limiting beliefs did you have to overcome individually? That's one. And second, more like, direct, practical. Any big legal mistakes that you made?
Sorry, any what?
Any big legal mistakes that you made?
Any big legal mistakes I made? I'm not going to say that on camera.
I mean, something that, was fixed, but like, okay, I should, like, for example, we discussed the plastic scale. Don't maybe something that you can share.
Let me think about this. I'll find you after, Christina. Limiting beliefs, yeah. So, it's so funny, it all blurs together. But we all have these limiting beliefs, and once you uncover them, you realize like what's been stopping you. Because we all unintentionally sabotage ourselves. Like if you've heard the air conditioning metaphor, where it's you set the thermostat at 70 degrees, and if you go above 70, you bring it back down to 70. If you go below, you go back up to 70. And like this is your baseline. And so I think for so many of us, we have beliefs that are set at some baseline, whether that was intentional or not. It's usually unintentional, and we don't realize that we're there. I think one limiting belief was that it's supposed to be stressful, and it's not fun all day, every day by any means. But I think the thing that I've actually learned, I used to only feel good when I was stressed out, because that to me, was, I'm pushing myself to my hardest. Because, and I think so many of us believe this, it's if I push myself as hard as I possibly can, then I'll be okay with failing, because I know I will have tried. But if I went on vacation, or if I take a break, or if I get 8 hours of sleep, which is ridiculous, you should absolutely get 8 hours of sleep. If I do those things and I fail, I'll never be able to forgive myself because it was under my control. Like, this is totally a limiting belief that was such a huge part of me, and I think many people probably share this. And so I think the question becomes then, it isn't that you should just take it easy. It is incredibly hard, and if you're not working 7 days a week in those early days, someone else is going to beat you. And that's just the reality of it. But I think the thing about stress is all of us have a stress bucket, which is, here's the amount of stress I will take, and it doesn't matter what's going on in life, you will find ways to fill that bucket. You will make things that aren't stressful, because that is your stress bucket and stress level. And so I think the thing I learned was, it's not about feeling stressed out every day. If I actually just learn to change my baseline acceptance level of where that is, I can still work really hard. I might not feel that same push in the same way, but I know that I will, I know that I can die any day. So it sounds really good. This is actually how I think about my life. Could I die today and feel like I was on the path? And I don't need to be there yet, but did I do today what I was supposed to do today at 100%?
First of all, thank you for being so real. How do you handle co-founder disagreements knowing that you might be wrong sometimes?
Sorry, say that again?
How do you handle co-founder disagreements knowing that you can actually be wrong sometimes?
knowing I can be wrong sometimes. I'm not wrong. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Sometimes.
Also, Christina, I forgot, our lawyer's in the crowd, so you can ask him about all the legal mistakes that we made. Just hilarious. By the way, John Colon is the best startup lawyer. I'm just going to put it out there. Okay, how do you handle co-founder disagreements when I might be wrong? I am wrong about so many things, and oh man. So, it's funny, I brought a friend here today who's working on an early stage startup, and we were talking about how important it is to have a singular person who is the end decision maker. Like, there needs to be a clear, one person is going to make the call, and the other person might not be happy about it, but one person is going to make the call. I think that if you're not having disagreements with your co-founder, then you what's going on a little bit. But it's about how you have those disagreements. And this is not just my co-founder, it's like any person at the company, not even executive. If I'm having a conversation with you and we see things differently, it should be a fact-finding experience where I'm learning something. And if I'm not, then something's wrong. And so that's kind of my gauge. And I think that is also how I kind of judge our teammates and whether they're the right fit. Because there's lots of people who just want to be right for the sake of being right, or who might completely ignore facts as well. And so I think about it as if I'm learning, and if they're learning, and if we're trying to search for truth together, then that's the way we should be handling it.
Good answer, thank you.
This is totally inefficient. 2 more questions. Last.
Hi, I have a health tech question. So, a few years ago, value-based models were so exciting, and then it just didn't go anywhere. And then, so that's it's really frustrating because to me, as the health tech founder, it feels like everything just kind of went sideways after that, and there's not many things that are very exciting. So, as a successful health tech company, what do you see is on the horizon that is actually working in the last few years, and where are we heading from here on?
Where are we heading? Yeah, so it looks like that there are value-based care companies that are doing well, but there's a few fundamental problems in the healthcare industry. One of them is that we're on this employer-sponsored insurance situation where, let's say that the average tenure at a job in the South here is 2 years, something like that. And when you're on your insurance company for 2 years and you switch insurance companies, they don't have a long-term incentive to care about your longevity and your health. They just want to minimize their costs in that 1 year, they being the insurance companies. So that's one of the core problems, and I think that's, a lot of these models are great in theory, but when you look at the economics and truly the flow of money, it doesn't make practical business sense. So I think one of the biggest shifts is alternative sources of funding in healthcare, and what I mean is a fancy way of saying basically consumers are paying for stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, the jargon in healthcare alone will make you want to run away very, very far. And so I try to use try to use English basically instead of jargon. So yeah, consumers are paying for things, and so I think one of the most exciting things is this blur between the consumer and the patient. Because 15 years ago, you were a patient who went to a doctor, and that was your experience in healthcare. The only product in healthcare was a doctor's visit. Now, you can go get a test on your own, you can go sign up for a course where you're learning about, gut health. There's so many different avenues and products that didn't exist. So there's new products that are being offered to consumers / patients. It's a hybrid model where it's somebody who cares enough about their health. They might be going through an issue, but they don't want to yet go see a doctor, but they want to start understanding what's going on. They want to wear a CGM. They want to. There's lots of experiences around this. I think what we're going to start seeing is this whole. How do I put it? This. I have a graph that I showed, but basically, this blurring line getting filled in with. It used to be there's WebMD where you look up stuff online. It's just content, or there's a doctor's visit, and there's no help for you in between. I think we're going to get products and services that fill in this in between, and there's going to be a lot of different payment models for it. I think you're going to get some of this stuff through your gym. I think you're going to get some of this stuff through your HSA. You're going to get some of this stuff through your own dollars and spending. You're going to get some of this stuff as company benefits. You're going to get some of this stuff through insurance. Like, there's so many different people who are incentivized now because there's grassroots demand for it.
Thank you.
Hello, thanks so much, Tara. I actually have a question for Elizabeth. Given that there are so many founders in the room, I'm actually curious to hear what are some of the characteristics of Tara as a founder that made you want to invest in her, and perhaps those are the same characteristics that you also look for in founders. Or what makes her stand out from any other founders that you've met, and perhaps those are the characteristics that you also see as commonality across the companies and the founders in your portfolio in general.
Sorry, I didn't take the stage away from you on the last question.
That's great.
Thank you. I think actually, to Tara's point earlier, I want to hone in on the word hustle for a moment. We're called Hustle Fund, and it's actually pretty deliberate. It's not just a gimmick. I think a lot of people think about hustle pretty generically of like, oh, I'm working so hard and I'm burning the midnight oil. But to my business partner, Eric, and me, like, we actually think of hustle as being very specific, and that is like moving in direction with speed. And there are a lot of things around that. It's like focus of what it is you're doing, and also speed of execution and learning. That concept is really, really hard, but if you can do that, you will be an amazing founder. Because when you think about it, like, founders, they don't come in knowing anything really about the business, right? You're coming in with the idea of, all right, I need to learn about this environment as quickly as possible. I need to learn all of these skill sets as quickly as possible to be able to hire people as quickly as possible. Like, you're just trying to do everything you have literally never done before and know nothing about as fast as you can. So you've got to learn with speed, execute with speed. So that's probably our number one. But I think other heuristics that we look for at Hustle Fund include things like, we do like operational efficiency. We're not the kind of fund that likes to just like throw tons of money and just like money will solve the problem. That usually doesn't work actually. And so we like founders who tend to be more frugal or at least very cost effective in stretching their buck in focusing on growth, but using the money well. I think other than that, just like having an open mind and some semblance of understanding of the problem and being able to get better and better every day at that. So I think actually that was all the time we have for questions. Thank you so much, Tara, for joining me. I know you're super busy.